Part 55. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 542. During the first level, the persistence of a group of competitors also impressed General Montenegro. He did not do anything too recklessly. Those who passed the 2 levels avoided the fate of being kicked out immediately. And this is the best result for those eliminated. After hearing this, a group of people responded, "Yes, General." General Montenegro nodded, and then explained, "Now, there are only the last 2 levels left in the assessment of elite combat soldiers. The first 2 levels, in addition to personal strength, also require some other traits, such as perseverance and judgment, etc., in order to pass the level. However, these last 2 levels, there are not so many tricks. The test is purely your hard power, namely strength and combat effectiveness. To put it bluntly, as long as the fist is hard enough, you can win." Hard power? After Wang Ling heard this, his brows jumped slightly. In the first 2 levels, he was able to overcome the 2 blockers through other means, but when it comes to hard power, he seemed to have no advantage. The physical fitness of the 2 blockers was even better than his. "Now, let's go to the 3rd level venue together." General Montenegro and KK didn't know his little thoughts. After speaking, he turned around and left. The staff beside him quickly issued commands to the 3 square groups, and a group of people drove into a closed place in a mighty manner. Wang Ling had never seen this place before. According to the staff, it was a place to test the impact of coalition tanks. The whole place looked like a large warehouse. When Wang Ling and the others arrived, there happened to be some tanks running fast inside. Middle. One of them, a Rhino tank, passed by Wang Ling's formation and rushed towards the end of the test field. Wang Ling and the others looked in this direction and found that there seemed to be 2 special large instruments placed there. This instrument looks somewhat like a boxing weapon seen in the real world, with a black stress point protruding from the front and a clock-like display above it. Buzz buzz. Boom. As soon as he saw this, the Rhino tank being tested slammed into it. With this collision, the Rhino tank seemed to be running at full power. After the collision, Wang Ling and the others vaguely felt that the testing ground was shaking, and the rear body of the Rhino tank was also suspended for more than 30 years under the huge momentum. Degree, then fell with a crash and quickly retreated. After the Rhino tank was withdrawn, the pointer on the display had stopped at the 803 scale, and it was not known what magnitude this number represented. Buzzing. Boom. While Wang Ling and the others were observing this scale, another anti-aircraft crawler vehicle had already collided with another tester, and finally a romantic word 520 appeared on it. Obviously, in terms of impact force, the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle cannot compare to the Rhino tank. Although the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle is much faster than the Rhino tank, the body of this tank is lighter after all, and its impact force cannot compete with those of main battle tanks. "Stop testing all tanks, get out of here and fight." 2 other tanks tried to continue the collision, but General Montenegro suddenly spoke up, stopped all the tanks, and drove them all out of the test site. Afterwards, General Haishan took Wang Ling and others closer to the tester, patted the black stress point of the tester, and explained, "This is what you use to test your strength." Ha! A group of people were a little stunned. This was used to test the collision force of the tank. Now it is used to test the strength of these finalists. Are you looking down on them too much? No matter how shocked they were, General Montenegro continued to introduce, the strength that a normal adult man can produce is between 10 and 50. The specific amount varies from person to person. And recruits who have received military training, which can probably produce a power of 30-70. As for you, and some of the perverts among them, it is natural to have a higher number than this number. The 3rd level tests the power, and the 20 finalists show your strongest power. Punch the force receiver 3 times, and finally record the average strength of the 3 times to judge your strength and select the last 6 strong fighters who will enter the battle finals. Are the rules that simple? A group of candidates were somewhat surprised after hearing this. Compared with the previous 2 levels, this level is simply not a bit simpler. However, simplicity is simplicity, but the effect is not compromised. This simple test can also test the exact strength index of all candidates. No wonder the next 2 levels test hard power. Without further ado, let's start testing now. No 001, No 004. Arrive. Get out of the queue and get in position. The simple test started quickly. Under the direction of General Montenegro, the 2 candidates quickly came out and each stood in front of a dynamometer. In order for everyone to do their best, there is no unified order at this link, and it is entirely up to individuals. As a result, after the 2 of them got into position, they assumed a fighting stance. After accumulating strength for a while, they roared and fired the first punch. Boom! Boom! With 2 collisions, the pointers on the 2 dynamometer monitors fell to 68 and 72 respectively. This power is simply top-notch among the recruits, but among the elite soldiers, it has no brilliance. When everyone sees this number, they remain calm and show no emotion. Ha! Boom! Boom! Immediately afterwards, the second punch also fell, and the scales of 70 and 73 appeared on the display, which were increased compared to the first punch. Ha! Boom! Boom! Finally, the third punch was thrown, and the 2 hit the mark of 75 together. No wonder each person has 3 punches. In this test, personal status may not always be at its peak. For example, these 2 people, after 3 punches, each punch is more powerful than the last. They seem to be gradually adjusting their status. No 016, No 019. Arrive. Get out of the queue and get in position. Compared with the previous 2 levels, this level is indeed much simpler. The test time for each person will not be too long. After the first 2 people have completed the test, the next group of people will step up, and then the third group, the fourth group, and so on. The test speed is very fast. The results of these testers are not too special. Most of the time, the scale is hovering around 70, and some of them have achieved a strength of more than 60. Naturally, there are also some particularly strong men who have achieved a strength of more than 80. In terms of strength, the one with the highest score actually had a strength of 93, which aroused a small amount of amazement. After testing for a while, the first 8 groups were quickly tested, and it was the turn of the 9th group, No 094 and No 098. Finally it was the turn of one of the stumbling blocks to come on stage. Wang Ling changed his previous casual attitude and looked attentively. Ha! Boom! After the 2 were in position, No 094 shouted and punched hard, hitting a force of 84 on the dynamometer. Among these candidates, he was considered powerful. Boom! However, before he could get proud, No 098 punched. His punch seemed to have no energy stored at all, and he was thrown out randomly, but when it hit the force measuring machine, a roar was heard instantly, which shocked most of the people present. After regaining consciousness, he quickly looked at the display of No 098, and saw that the scale on it jumped to the number 495 like flying. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 543. Hiss. Is this bitch still a human? 495. No wonder he was able to run so fast in the first level. He is such a monster of emotions. My dear, don't you pay for your life by scaring people to death. As the pointer of the display stopped at the number 495, almost everyone in the test site was startled. Many people took a breath of air conditioning and couldn't help but whisper in front of General Montenegro. What does this number mean? You must know that the strongest power achieved by those testers before was only 93, which already caused a small group of exclamations, but in the end this was just a fraction of no 098. The power scale of 495. You must know that the collision force of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle that collided rapidly before only reached the 520 scale, and that still relied on the powerful maneuverability of the locomotive. But no 098 actually relied on his own body to punch out with a force of 495. If it were stronger, he could already catch up with the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. What kind of monster-level power is this? After a group of candidates marveled, their eyes turned to no 098 with deep fear. Even General Montenegro's pupils couldn't help but shrink for a moment, but the old general's psychological quality was really not good at all. He stared at no 098 for a while, and then lost any other expression. No 094, who was in the same group as no 098, was originally quite satisfied with his results, but as soon as the 495 power index appeared, his 84 seemed like a child playing house. There is no harm without comparison. This impact can hit no 094 hard. Together with no 098, he is like a foil. Boom. However, no 098, the stumbling block, didn't care about other people's opinions at all. When everyone was amazed, he had already punched the second punch, and the power index of 495 appeared on the monitor again. Boom. Then, there was a third punch, and the third 495 appeared. As monsters temporarily designed by the system, under the command of the coalition forces, it can be said that the two roadblocks have reached the extreme level of strengthening the intermediate level. And because of the particularity of their programs, they are like robots, powerful and very stable at the same time. 3 times in a row bombing, all have the same power index. However, compared with the sensation brought by this index, other people did not care about this detail and just looked at him like a monster. Even Wang Ling gritted his teeth and was very concerned about the performance of the stumbling block. He himself was not sure that he could achieve such a high power. Although when he was mad before, he could shake the Allied Grizzly tank with physical fists, but that was only when the Grizzly tank was not moving, and it could only move a distance of more than 10 centimeters. In fact, his strength is far behind the impact of these main battle tanks. If he were to confront the tanks, he would have absolutely no chance of winning. Therefore, this 495 power index is also a heavy pressure for him. Ha! Boom! Now, almost everyone was looking at no 098 and almost ignored no 094. As a result, the aggrieved no 094's face was particularly ugly. He yelled and threw his second punch unwillingly. Only then did the others' eyes were attracted to him. However, compared with the results of no 098, his results are nothing interesting. Not only that, even he himself was affected. The power of the second punch was not even as good as the first punch, only hitting an 83 power index. Fortunately, he adjusted in time, and the subsequent third punch made some progress, reaching a power index of 85, but compared with no 098, it was still not good enough. The 9th group of tests has finally ended here, but others are still in the shock of no 098, and it is difficult to recover for a while. No 099, no 100. Arrive. Arrive. Get out of the queue and get in position. General Montenegro was still adaptable and quickly corrected his mentality and called out the serial number list of the last group. And this group, compared to the 9th group, is not simple. It not only includes another stumbling block, but also the pervert Wang Ling. It can be said that the biggest attraction of this third level is in this last group. Others also judged this from the previous 2 levels. They quickly recovered from the shock of no 098, concentrated their energy, and began to pay attention to the 2 of them. Boom. The first one to take action was No 099. While Wang Ling was still preparing, he had already punched out. With a boom sound, the pointer scale on the dynamometer display where it was located immediately jumped to 495. On the strength index. After all, they are obstacles created by the system at the same time. Apart from their different appearances, there is no difference between the two people in other places, including the level of strength. The results of No 099's punch are exactly the same as those of No 098. Hiss, another monster. These two are monsters on the same level. There is a precedent of No 098 before, and people already have a certain ability to accept the results of No 099. But shock is inevitable. After all, the power index of 495 is too abnormal. Wang Ling's preparation was disrupted. He turned his head and took a look. He was no longer surprised by the result of No 099, but he was inevitably under a lot of pressure. Boom. And No 099 did not give people a chance to digest this shock at all. The aftermath of the first punch had not yet passed, and the second punch had already been blasted out, also hitting a power index of 495. Boom. The third punch was even more crisp, not even giving time for shock. It was already punched out with another 495, and the test of No 099 was over. These two stumbling blocks had a total of 6 boxing strength tests, all of which were 495. Not to mention how neat they were, so neat that only robots could do it. Of course, given their form, it's not an exaggeration to call them robots. Now, among all the candidates in the third round, only one Wang Ling is left. Everyone has focused their attention on him, and their eyes are full of expectation. In their hearts, Wang Ling is not inferior to these two perverted and powerful figures, and he is also the one who has the highest reputation for becoming an elite combat soldier. What achievements can he achieve? Hoo-ha! Boom! Under the gaze of many people, Wang Ling took a deep breath, tried hard to adjust his mentality and condition, shouted, and punched hard, hitting the stress point of the dynamometer with a boom. After hearing the roar 6 or 7 times in succession, the others had already adapted to it, and everyone was now staring intently at the strength index of the dynamometer. Under their gaze, they saw the pointer rapidly sweeping past 100, over 200, and then quickly across 300. After crossing 400, the needle began to weaken, and finally stopped at the number 478. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 544. 478. Wang Ling's first punch actually hit a power index of 478. This number is also terrifying. Compared with other candidates in the third level, it is equivalent to a monster. However, after all, the first two stumbling blocks both achieved an average score of 495. Compared to the two of them, Wang Ling's 478 didn't have much impact. After the candidates who were watching around saw this number, they were naturally horrified by this value, but more importantly, they were still worried and questioning. You know, because in the first level Wang Ling cheered them up regardless of his identity, and in the end he worked so hard that he became hoarse and even fainted. This kind of performance can be said to have completely convinced them. In their hearts, the elite combat soldiers should belong to them. It's Wang Ling. As for the two stumbling blocks, they were as cold as stones and kept away from people thousands of miles away. No one at the scene expected them to have the last laugh. And the only person who can intercept them is Wang Ling. However, at this level, Wang Ling fell behind the two obstacles from the beginning, which really made a group of candidates sweat. Of course, Wang Ling was not very satisfied with this result. If we just compare it with other candidates, this result is definitely enough to be proud of, but without comparison, there is no gap. This is still a long way behind the two obstacles. Hoo-hoo. Although there are 4 levels in the assessment, and the one with the best overall score will be selected in the end, Wang Ling cannot lag too far behind them in this level. After all, it involves elite combat soldiers. For this reason, after Wang Ling withdrew his fist, he also worked hard to adjust his condition. He is different from the two blockers in that his power output is not constant. When his condition is good, he can produce stronger power, but when his condition is bad, he may be weaker. The key is his condition. Snort. After adjusting continuously for a while, Wang Ling finally aimed at the point of stress, grunted, and punched a second time. Boom. After a deafening roar came out, everyone quickly stared at the monitor. As a result, under their gaze, the second punch finally landed on the power index of 485. 485, which was a full 10 points lower than the two blockers, but it was still a big improvement compared to his first punch. After others saw it, although they were still not excited, they felt a little more hopeful. With this increase, number 100 may eventually surpass those two stones. Call 485. It's still not enough, we need stronger power. As for Wang Ling, he didn't feel happy after seeing this number. He also has self-awareness. In terms of pure strength, even if he exerts himself to the extreme, it will be difficult to surpass two obstacles. Even if he exerts himself to the extreme, it will be too difficult. At this time, Wang Ling was adjusting and thinking about countermeasures. First of all, he returned to the system transfer station, successfully injected the high-level physical fitness enhancer, and then returned to the red alert world. By then, he could completely defeat two obstacles in all aspects. However, the success rate of advanced enhancement was too low. Wang Ling had no confidence that it would succeed. If it failed, it would be a dead end, and the gain would not be worth the loss. As for the other point, I also returned to the transfer station, switched to several arms one after another, and exchanged the experience books of each arm to make up for some of the deficiencies in physical fitness. However, when he thought about it, this method was also ruled out by Wang Ling. The military experience book can only upgrade him to the 1-star veteran level of the corresponding military unit, which is still far behind the ultimate enhancement of the roadblock. Moreover, this approach comes at the cost of tens of thousands of points. Although it is much easier for Wang Ling to earn points now than before, these points are all exchanged for lives and may be of great use in the future, so they cannot afford to be wasted in this way. By the way, maybe you can try this. After thinking about it, Wang Ling suddenly thought of something. He raised his brows and slowly assumed a charging posture. However, there was already a faint electric light surging in his right hand. Yes, Wang Ling was thinking of using the electromagnetic energy of the magnetic blast infantry to increase the force. The third level tested pure physical strength. Wang Ling used electromagnetic energy, which was actually a bit of cheating. However, Wang Ling really wanted to surpass the two obstacles now, so he had no choice but to try this. Number 100, come on. Come on, over 495. Come on number 100, I'm optimistic about you. Seeing Wang Ling's posture, other candidates watching the battle couldn't help but cheer Wang Ling. Wang Ling felt their thoughts and felt a little ashamed in his heart, but he couldn't let go now. He took a long breath, forcibly eliminated all other emotions, stared at the stress point of the fist weapon, and groaned. Finally the third punch was thrown. Boom. Crackling. Crackling. Kaka. Boom. Ever since, a lively scene came. Wang Ling's punch indeed hit the force receiving point of the fist weapon hard, but because the force was too strong, the electromagnetic energy in his hand could not be perfectly controlled, and part of it surged out. The main material of the force-bearing point of the fist force is high-hardness rubber, which has no electrical conductivity. However, the arc leaked from Wang Ling's hand bypassed the force-bearing point in an arc shape and directly penetrated into the fist force. Internal. Although this fist weapon is not very precise, it has a lot of internal parts. As a result, these arcs suddenly broke in and electrified a batch of metal parts in an instant, and some even exploded directly. And this explosion seemed to have a chain effect. A large number of parts exploded in the confined space, affecting the entire boxing machine. After a series of flashes of electric sparks, there was a bang, and the entire rear half of the machine exploded. Exploded. GA. After all, it was the second half of the explosion. The shock wave did not affect Wang Ling and others in front, but this sudden explosion also shocked almost everyone at the scene. Many people opened their mouths in an exaggerated manner, with expressions it was an unprecedented shock. This punch actually exploded the punch weapon. In shock, some people also looked at the front half of the display that had not been blown up. The pointer had suddenly stopped at the 521 power scale, not only surpassing the two roadblocks, but even the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. A little beyond it. The electromagnetic energy of the magnetic blast infantry is really effective. Seeing this number, many candidates at the scene were shocked, but gradually became happy. Number 100 did it, surpassing those two stones. However, as the creator of this miracle, Wang Ling was not happy at all. It's not that the punch was broken, but the way the punch was delivered was as if it hit his conscience. It was painful and uncomfortable. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 545. Haha, 521. We did it, number 100 surpassed those two stones. Well done, no 100. The onlookers who didn't know the truth became happy after seeing this number, but the two roadblocks couldn't help but frowned. Although it was a mechanical procedure, they were worried about being surpassed by Wang Ling for the third time. Thing, obviously very dissatisfied. Humph. You're still cheering, you're cheering, and the dynamometer has exploded. As for General Haishan, he is now dumbfounded. Although he is very satisfied with Wang Ling's final results, the blow to his fist weapon almost made him go crazy. The dumbfounded expression on his big body actually looks a bit funny. Those candidates who had been reprimanded quickly shut their mouths, but some of them still giggled hee-hee a few times. They didn't care at all about punch weapons, and they would just explode if they exploded. But General Montenegro was very concerned and glared at Wang Ling angrily. Okay. Well done. This result is a record. But look what you did. There are only 2 dynamometers in total. He even blew one up for me. It seemed that it was rare to see the anxious yet somewhat helpless look of General Montenegro. After hearing this, many of the other candidates couldn't help but snickered. However, Wang Ling couldn't laugh at all. He solemnly gave General Montenegro a military salute and said seriously, "General, it's my fault. My results in this level are invalid." Ah. Voided? Did I hear wrongly? No, what happened? It was invalidated? Just because the dynamometer exploded? Stop making a fuss, okay. It's so hard to surpass those 2 stones, why is it still invalid? No, if all the results of the 3rd level are invalidated, you will have no chance. When all the candidates heard Wang Ling's words, they were all shocked and found it difficult to understand his decision. Not only them, but also the 2 blockers and even the Montenegrin general were surprised. However, after all, the 2 stumbling blocks lacked emotion and just returned to their normal expressions without making any statements. General Haishan stared at Wang Ling, examining him over and over again, as if he could see through people's hearts. As for Wang Ling, he always maintained a posture of standing at attention, saying nothing, and his expression was very solemn. To be honest, he already regretted that punch just now. The selection of elite combat soldiers must be fair and just, but for the pure strength test, he used electromagnetic energy to assist, breaking the rules. Although his performance exceeded the two obstacles, this method was something he himself was ashamed of. Now that he is requesting to have his grades revoked, there is a high possibility that he will miss out on being an elite combat soldier, but it is better than regretting being so dirty all the time in his heart. In doing so, to put it bluntly, he is redressing his conscience. Number 100, stop joking, just blow up a dynamometer. Aren't the coalition forces so poor that they can't even bear to part with a dynamometer? Yeah, don't be willful, it's not a big deal. The candidates who didn't know the truth were still admonishing, but Wang Ling remained unmoved. In the end, General Montenegro interrupted them with a wave of his hand. He stared at Wang Ling, narrowed his eyes, and then smiled inexplicably. Ha ha, very good, as you wish. General. You can't, General. The candidates were anxious, but General Montenegro turned back and glared at them, stopping them. Then he looked at Wang Ling and explained, if you do something wrong, you will naturally have to pay for your actions. However, your invalidated score is not the entire third level, but the third punch. For others, count the average of the 3 punches, but you can only count the average of the 2 punches. Wang Ling was still a little depressed at first, but when he heard General Haishan's words, his eyes suddenly brightened. Originally, his request was to cancel the results of the entire third level, but in that case, it would be difficult for him to compete for elite combat soldiers. However, General Montenegro only invalidated the results of the third punch, and the first 2 punches were evenly counted. This helped Wang Ling a lot, as if he pulled him back from the edge of the cliff. In the first 2 punches, although Wang Ling's strength is still somewhat behind the 2 blockers, this gap is not too big. Relying on the evaluation of the first 2 levels, he can completely make up for it, and then fight for the elite again. Soldier. Why, you don't agree? General Haishan looked at Wang Ling, smiled playfully, and asked. Wang Ling quickly shook his head and said in surprise, no, General, let's do it like this. Thank you, General. The results obtained through cheating were cancelled, and Wang Ling felt much less guilty at the same time, and he could continue to participate in the competition, which was of course the best result for him. The others were still confused as to what was going on. They glanced at each other and they were all very confused, so they just broke a dynamometer. What's the matter? However, fortunately, the results of Wang Ling's first 2 punches in this level were still retained, and he did not have to do anything difficult, so they did not protest too much. After settling this matter, General Montenegro once again ordered a group of candidates to assemble. After waiting for the statisticians for a minute, he got the list and then said, the third level of assessment ends here. Because the third level assessment is simple and does not require special comprehensive evaluation and scoring, so the on-site staff has already counted the top 6 finalists. They are no 055, no 077, no 088, no 098, no 099, and number 100. Click here. The above-mentioned 6 people come out. There were no surprises among the 6 finalists, the 2 blockers and Wang Ling, but the other 3 were overjoyed and walked out of the formation with smiles on their faces, lining up in a row with Wang Ling and the others. General Montenegro looked at the 6 of them, nodded and praised, congratulations to the 6 of you, you passed 3 rounds of cruel assessments and successfully reached the final level. Among all the elites, those who can reach this step can be said to be the elites. Elites, you are very good. Wang Ling and the other 3 people were secretly happy after hearing this, but the 2 roadblocks remained expressionless. Then General Montenegro said, however, there can only be one final winner. For this, you still need to conduct the final round of combat effectiveness assessment. Something unexpected happened today, and this final test has been postponed to tomorrow. You 6 people can choose a dedicated single-room dormitory, and the winner will be treated like a winner. Of course, you can also continue to sleep in the mixed dormitory. These are your freedoms. That's it for today. Number 100 will stay, and everyone else will be dismissed. As the disbandment order was issued, other candidates left one after another. After leaving the testing site, they gathered in small groups to discuss the results of the third level. But Wang Ling stayed alone at the testing site, standing dignifiedly in front of General Montenegro, silent. General Montenegro looked at him with a smile and asked, "Do you know why I left you alone?" Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 546. General, I probably know. Wang Ling's answer was a little unconfident. But General Montenegro stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder, saying with a kind of sincerity, "Young man, it's not easy to get to this point. I don't want to see you ruin your future. Fortunately, you found your way back and are willing to bear the consequences. If you know your mistakes and can correct them, you are a good comrade. Otherwise, do you think that the third level will only cancel the results of your third punch?" Wang Ling pursed his lips, but after all, he couldn't answer a word. Sure enough, for an old general like Haishan, whose eyelashes were almost empty, he had already noticed that Wang Ling was cheating at the first moment, and that was why he gave the lecture just now. Of course, this lecture is not over yet. General Montenegro continued, "Originally, if you had not proposed to abolish your results just now, you could have successfully advanced to the finals and won in the end, but I will not put the elite, I leave the combat soldiers to you. Because those who defeat their comrades through opportunism are not worthy of the title of hero. General, I'm sorry, I was too impatient at this point." Wang Ling finally couldn't help it and lowered his head in shame. However, General Montenegro did not reprimand him. He directly hugged Wang Ling's arm with his strong arms and said with a smile, "Haha, young man, to be honest, you cheated out of desperation just now. In fact, I can understand it. You are too eager to be an elite combat soldier. From the bottom of your heart, you want to surpass No. 098 and No. 099, so you went astray. This kind of mentality is too common among you young people. But what I didn't expect was yes, as soon as the punch was thrown, you kid already recognized your mistake and corrected it and admitted it with a sincere attitude. Why should I, an old guy, make things difficult for you? I'm not that rigid. It's not surprising that I make mistakes. Everyone will make them. As long as in my eyes, you are a good soldier if you can admit your mistakes and correct them in time. However, there must still be punishments, even if they are just symbolic. Good guy, this kind of rhetoric is very similar to the earnest words of teachers and parents in reality. Many people who have experienced it may be a little annoyed by it. Of course Wang Ling has heard it too many times. However, the environment is different, the scene is different, and the effects and feelings are naturally different. In the world of Red Alert, the old Montenegrin general held his arm and spoke so earnestly. Wang Ling was deeply touched for a moment and took a deep breath. Replied solemnly, "I understand, General." "Haha, that's enough. Tomorrow's finals, there are a few old guys coming to watch the game together, don't lose, I'm optimistic about you. Okay, let's go free." When General Montenegro talks to people alone, he is not as serious as before and appears to be very approachable. Maybe this is General Montenegro's true temperament. After saying this, General Haishan punched Wang Ling in the chest, said hello, turned around and left, leaving only a majestic figure behind. After Wang Ling looked at it, he couldn't help but give a military salute to the back to show respect. Tisk 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 tisk. However, this apparently solemn scene has something to spoil the situation. Before Wang Ling could put down his movements, Uncle Hay's gloating voice came from his mind, "Isn't it just a cheat? As for making it so grand, it sounds like you haven't cheated on real-world exams. For it." After hearing this, Wang Ling was caught off guard by this godlike comment. After being stunned for a while, he said with a wry smile, "Uncle Hay, please stop making fun of me. This is different. In reality, the situation is complicated and it is inconvenient for me. Say more, but this is a red alert world, surrounded by comrades, and the emotions are completely different. Cut." Uncle Hay was somewhat disapproving and pointed it out, "There is no need for you to care so much about cheating this time. In fact, the two roadblocks were temporarily created by the system and deliberately acted as obstacles. Within the scope of the coalition forces, under the limit of intermediate enhancement, they have already strengthened to the extreme, their existence itself is cheating. Do you still need to care about this with them?" There seems to be so much truth to what he said, I almost believed it. Wang Ling smiled and shook his head. Although he said this verbally, in fact, these simple words of enlightenment from Uncle Hay had wiped away the shame in Wang Ling's heart, and he slowly regained his confidence. Buzzing. At this time, the tanks that had been kicked out of the test site began to re-enter. I don't know how they would react when they saw that one of the test dynamometers was blown. But Wang Ling didn't want to watch the show anymore, so he stretched and left here. Outside the test site, many candidates were still discussing in groups. When they saw Wang Ling coming out, they all came forward to ask what General Montenegro had left him for. Some even made naughty jokes, which made people laugh and cry. Wang Ling also quickly became friends with them. However, when it came to cheating in the third level, Wang Ling acknowledged his mistake and corrected it, but did not make it public. Others just thought that Wang Ling had made a mistake by exploding the force measuring device. So Wang Ling didn't go into too much detail, just found an excuse and brushed it off. Temporarily separated from the cruelty of the battlefield, this afternoon was generally quite relaxing. The 6 elite soldiers who were shortlisted for the final battle in the 4th level had the right to choose to live in a single room, but in the end, only 2 stumbling blocks chose to move out and live alone in a single room. Many candidates are not very dissatisfied with him for this, but this is their right, so not many people talk about it. Wang Ling and the other 3 people were still living in the mixed dormitory, chatting and spanking with the others. Almost every soldier has his own social network. Some of the candidates also know some of Wang Ling's acquaintances, such as Chen Tong, Yan Tian, Long Gang, etc. Among the hundreds of candidates, those are also a strong comrade who can at least advance to the 3rd level. However, none of these comrades came to participate in the competition, which Wang Ling was originally quite surprised about. However, during the afternoon conversation, Wang Ling accidentally learned that it was not that they were not qualified to come, but that they gave up immediately after knowing that Wang Ling came to participate. Others don't know about Wang Ling's perversion, don't they? With Wang Ling participating in the competition, it would have nothing to do with them. Instead of coming to join in the fun, it would be better to stay on the front line and focus on defense. After learning the news, Wang Ling was dumbfounded. Why is there no acquaintance here? After all the assessments are about to end. Those candidates who have been screened have already lowered their arrogant heads, and there is no barrier between them. Even the 3 elite soldiers who were shortlisted are also confident about the final victory. He didn't hold out much hope, not to mention that the 2 biggest roadblocks had already moved out. This afternoon, this group of soldiers chatted happily. That night, Wang Ling also returned to the real world as a habit. After resting for a day, he hurriedly came to the red alert world and lay on the bed and slept until dawn. If nothing else, it's almost time to capture the elite combat soldiers today. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 547. On this day, the atmosphere has been a little subtle since early morning. It seems that there is a little bit of enthusiasm and expectation everywhere, permeating the entire testing ground, quietly stirring up the storm. Just like the previous 2 days, Wang Ling got up, did some activities, and then went to the cafeteria to have breakfast with other comrades. After returning to the dormitory, he took a final rest. It wasn't until the rally call sounded on the playground that Wang Ling cheered up. The last hurdle for this elite combat soldier was finally here. Regardless of whether they were promoted or eliminated, all the candidates rushed out of the dormitory immediately and came to the playground to assemble. Wang Ling and other 6 people who advanced to the final level stood at the front and lined up in numerical order. The others formed a tacit formation at the back to watch the 6 people. I don't know when the work started, but now a marble arena has been set up on the playground, half a meter high and 10 meters square. This is the venue for the 4th level. Beside the ring, all the staff in the test field were in place to watch the battle. There were even 4 more officers, divided into 2 lieutenant generals and 2 generals. They were all unfamiliar faces that Wang Ling had never seen before. Now, these 4 officers looked at Wang Ling and the others from a distance, nodded with satisfaction, and were still whispering something to each other, but the specific content was too far apart for Wang Ling to hear. As for General Montenegro, he was now standing in front of the 6 of them. Today's General Haitian, in front of everyone, has returned to his serious and majestic state. He is not at all the approachable person he was when he had a private meeting with Wang Ling yesterday. The aura of a superior person is so overwhelming that everyone present is quietly beating the drum in their hearts. After all the personnel were in place, General Haitian glanced at Wang Ling and the other 6, and said loudly, "We have finally reached the last level. I have been looking forward to this day for a long time. Among the hundreds of elites, the 6 of you broke out and the battle has arrived. In this last step, regardless of success or failure, you can all be proud of your achievements." After a pause, General Montenegro looked at the 6 of them again with that scrutinizing gaze, and asked, "However, there can only be one elite combat soldier. In other words, you 6 still need the final step. To compete, the overall comprehensive score can be determined. Now, the 4th level is about to begin. Are you ready?" "Ready." The 6 Wang Lings shouted almost hysterically, and their momentum almost instantly overwhelmed everyone in the room. General Montenegro nodded with satisfaction, then turned around and pointed to the ring. "Did you see that ring? This is the battlefield for your 4th level. In this 4th level, your combat effectiveness is tested. 6 people need to do it at the same time. Stand on the ring, engage in a melee, and decide the final winner. The rules are also very simple. No weapons are allowed. Knocking the opponent unconscious or knocking him off the ring counts as a win. It should be noted that you are not allowed to kill people. The method of killing, then it's for dealing with the enemy, not your comrades. But it doesn't matter if you break your arms or legs." After hearing this, Wang Ling was a little surprised. This so-called combat effectiveness test turned out to be a fight? This assessment is simple and trouble-free. It's a mule or a horse. You can pull it out and see the real results under your hands. If it were like yesterday, where pure strength or other hard indicators were tested, Wang Ling really wouldn't have an advantage over the 2 roadblocks, but in a fight, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. It is true that these 2 blockers are superior to Wang Ling in terms of speed and strength, and they may even be proficient in Zhongxingkan. But fighting is not just based on these hard indicators. In real life, there are principles and moves of 4 or 2 moves 1,000 pounds. There are many examples of the weak defeating the strong. Wang Ling originally came from the real world. He had learned many fighting moves and had too much fighting experience after the initial strengthening. What's more, compared with the roadblock, his strength was not 4 ounces and 1000 caddies. So in this level, on the surface, Wang Ling was weaker than the two blockers, but in fact, he had a great advantage and had a great advantage in this level. However, the other three people were suffering. After hearing the assessment rules, they felt bitter in their hearts. Do they know how powerful Wang Ling and the two blockers are, fighting with these three people? Isn't that seeking death? As for the two stumbling blocks, their faces were always expressionless, as if they had no emotion. Without further ado, let's go on stage and take your seats. After the introduction of the rules, General Montenegro was already urging him. Under his order, the 6 people quickly boarded the ring. After all, it was a melee between 6 people, and they were all opponents. The 6 people each occupied a position and faced each other from a distance. General Montenegro was not the host. At this time, he also returned to the spectator seat and stood with the 4 officers. One of the generals looked at the postures of the 4 of them and asked, "Who do you think among the 6 of them will win in the end?" A lieutenant general pondered for a moment and replied, "I have seen the results of the previous levels. No 098, 099, and number 100 are the most promising, but as for who will win, I can't say for sure." Another lieutenant general also analyzed, in the first and second levels, number 100 performed outstandingly and had the highest overall score, but it was higher in terms of personal will and judgment. In terms of hard power, it was actually not as good as No 098 and No 099. The third level, the hard power level, was overtaken by those two perverts, so it's hard to say for this level. But in my personal opinion, No 098 or No 099 has a better chance of winning. Yeah. At this time, the last general laughed and said, "I think number 100 has a better chance of winning. Colonel Wang Ling, I have heard a lot about his front-line achievements. Even the coach praised him. Yujia. Although it's the first time I've met him, I believe in the coach's vision. Montenegro, what do you think?" General Montenegro crossed his arms, shook his head and said with a smile, "A bowl of water is even, I don't want to comment, just let the facts speak for themselves." While these generals were talking to each other, there was also a storm in the arena. Although they were confronting each other, there were already electric sparks rubbing against each other. Among them, the confrontation between Wang Ling and the two roadblocks was the most intense. They were both staring at each other and taking strict precautions. As for the other 3, they knew that they were weak and had no hope. After looking at each other, they seemed to have reached some kind of agreement and looked at Wang Ling together. From the looks of it, it was obvious that he planned to join forces with Wang Ling first to kill the 2 stumbling blocks. However, Wang Ling knew that the 2 stumbling blocks were powerful and that these 3 people could not be counted on at all, so he did not pay attention to them from the beginning. All his energy was focused on the 2 stumbling blocks and he did not notice the negotiations between the 3. Look. The 4th level, 6-person melee, starts now. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 548. Just when the 6 people on the stage had different thoughts, the staff start order was finally issued. Wang Ling and the 2 blockers remained unmoved by this order and kept staring at each other, but the hearts of the other 3 people sank. These 3 people basically didn't have much room to perform in the ring. It could be said that they were just making up the numbers. They failed to get a response from Wang Ling. If they faced 2 obstacles, they had no chance of winning. However, after all, they had already stood on the stage of this decisive battle. The 3 of them did not want to just sit back and wait for death. Naturally, they would not target Wang Ling. However, after making eye contact, the 3 of them attacked the closest No 098 together. It is true that 2 blockers are very powerful, but if the 3 of them join forces to deal with one person alone, they may have some chance of winning. Of course, It's just maybe. In fact, the gap between them and the roadblock cannot be made up by quantity at all. Snort. Faced with the joint attack of these three people, No 098 looked very disdainful. He just snorted coldly, then flew up and kicked No 055 in the front with a side kick, and kicked him away for more than a dozen times. Me, fell to the stage with a bang, defeated too simply. The other two people were shocked, but the offensive had already begun and there was no room for retreat. So they attacked No 098's eyes with one hand and kicked him in the crotch. The moves are a bit underhanded, but not against the rules. However, in the face of absolute strength, no matter how destructive the moves are, it is meaningless. No 098 just casually grabbed the wrist of No 088 and broke it with a hard twist. No 088's body shook violently in pain. Trembling. Then the kick that had not yet landed temporarily changed direction, blocking No 077's bottom kick. Without waiting for his reaction, the kick suddenly changed direction again and kicked No 088 in the side of the face, knocking him up in the air. He turned half a circle and fell to the ground, his whole body being kicked. Of course, this is not over yet. No 088 was kicked over. No 098 then used another hook to forcefully capture No 077. His hands continuously changed positions, grabbing his Tianling cap with one hand and his chin with the other. Looking at that posture, it was obvious that it would break his cervical vertebrae. Stop. Stop, you can't kill. This scene shocked many people at the scene. Wang Ling and the staff shouted almost at the same time, forcibly interrupting No 098's actions. No 098 used the Zhengxing fist, which had many killing moves. This move was one of them, and he used it conveniently. Fortunately, Wang Ling and the staff responded in time, otherwise someone would have been killed. However, even if the killing move stopped, No 098's attack did not stop. He slapped No 077 on the back, almost shattering his internal organs, and then kicked No 077 and No 088 with two consecutive kicks. Get off the ring and clear the place. Compared with No 055, the injuries of these two people were more serious. After flying down from the ring, the onlookers in the audience screamed. Then many people rushed forward to help them up and check the situation. Even the military doctors hurriedly came over. After diagnosis, it was almost certain that No 077 suffered internal injuries, internal bleeding, and the condition was serious. He was hurriedly taken away on a stretcher. No 088 had a slight concussion and a serious wrist injury. The military doctor kneaded and reconnected it, but the bones were cracked in many places. Without a few months of rest, it was impossible to move again. After hearing the military doctor's diagnosis, many people at the scene gasped, and even Wang Ling couldn't help but clenched his fists. After watching the two people being carried away, Wang Ling stared at the two roadblocks and asked, "You two, are you too harsh?" No 098 was unmoved and explained calmly, "As long as no one is killed, it does not violate the law regardless of the severity of the injury." No 099 also said later, "This is just a clearance. Not only them, you will also be cleared. As long as we defeat you, we will complete the mission." Wang Ling was also annoyed by them. He patted his face, laughed mockingly a few times and then asked, "Clear me? It's just up to you, are you worthy? Number 100, cripple them. These two rocks are simply inhumane. Number 100, kill them. Destroy them. Number 100, it's up to you." At this time, those onlookers couldn't help shouting. After hearing this, Wang Ling snorted coldly and pointed at the crowd behind him with his thumb, "Did you hear that? You have committed public outrage." No 098 tilted his head, looking puzzled, "You are so strange, we obviously didn't break the rules, why are you angry?" "Haha, It is indeed a mechanical program with no humanity at all. Wang Ling didn't even bother to explain. However, No 099 was open-minded. It doesn't matter, our target is just you. As long as we defeat you, everything will be over. Defeat me? Again, you are not worthy. Whether it's worthy or not, let's try it and decide. Come on, let me try and see how big the gap is between us. Snort. The verbal conflict between the two sides was very fierce, and eventually a powder keg was ignited and a head-on conflict broke out. The moves of the two blockers were very direct, just two simple punches, flying over and hitting Wang Ling in the face. Of course, the move is simple, but full of power. Wang Ling hurriedly stretched out his hands to resist the two punches, but was pushed by the two punches for more than 2 meters before he could stop, and because of excessive force, his arms were shaking. When the attack failed, the two blockers immediately changed their tactics and kicked Wang Ling in the abdomen together. Wang Ling hurriedly dodged and tried to jump back, but as soon as he retreated, the two blockers stopped temporarily, grabbed Wang Ling's arm in the air, turned around and threw him behind him, hitting the ring floor hard. Smash it! Fortunately, Wang Ling reacted in time. When he was approaching the floor, he suddenly reached out and slapped it on the floor, making a loud boom sound. He himself used this momentum to stabilize his body. But before he could stand up, two roadblocks rushed up again, stretched out their feet and stamped hard on his body. Snort. Feeling this threat, Wang Ling reacted temporarily and dodged sideways, escaping the kick and using this to distance himself. Boom. But the floor was damaged. Centered around their feet, the floor within a 1-meter radius was filled with dense cracks. You can imagine how terrifying it would be if these 2 feet stomped on Wang Ling. This series of battles sounds complicated, but in fact it only takes place in a few seconds. In these few seconds, the two blockers launched attacks one after another, with fierce moves. Even if Wang Ling was just 1 step slower, he would suffer. It can be said that they were completely suppressed. It was also the battle within these few seconds that made all the audience's hearts twitch. Every detail and move made their eyes wide open, for fear of missing something. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 549. The successive fierce battles and the collision of electric sparks firmly attracted everyone's attention, staring at the ring intently. All the eliminated candidates at the scene, without exception, were supporting Wang Ling. However, seeing Wang Ling at a huge disadvantage in these successive collisions, they couldn't help but sweat for Wang Ling. However, no one was surprised by this. After all, the physical fitness of the two roadblocks was better than that of Wang Ling. In addition, it was 2-on-1. It was normal for them to overwhelm Wang Ling from the beginning. Even if Wang Ling really lost this fight, no one would be biased against Wang Ling. Compared to this group of people, other spectators did not have this bias in their hearts. Although it was a little uncomfortable to see two stumbling blocks, after all, there were no violations, and it was hard for them to accuse them. The focus of watching was to appreciate the battle between dragons and tigers. As for the result, not many people discussed it. Sure enough, my guess was correct. No 098 and No 099 have a better chance of winning. However, just because there weren't many people discussing, it didn't mean there weren't any. For example, those officers had previously asserted that the two people standing in the way had a good chance of winning, and the lieutenant general nodded matter-of-factly. Another lieutenant general also echoed, now it seems that this is what happened. No 098 and No 099 were originally stronger than Wang Ling in terms of hard power, but they just joined forces to attack. It seems that they are still weak. There is a tacit understanding. This is very disadvantageous for Wang Ling. Really? Haha, don't let others get discouraged easily until the last step. The general who had been partial to Wang Ling before smiled and said, Just because you suffered a loss at the beginning does not mean you will always suffer a loss. Don't underestimate Wang Lingling. The other general never expressed his position from beginning to end, and at this time he dropped the topic directly. Black Mountain, during the first 3 levels, you watched them come over with your own eyes, so you have some understanding of them. Well, who do you think will win? General Montenegro crossed his arms. He was obviously very confident in his judgment, but he pretended not to know. He shook his head and said, "Don't ask me. If I say something wrong, wouldn't it be embarrassing? It's better to watch the game with peace of mind." Several other generals glanced at each other, and seeing that they couldn't trick him out, they had no choice but to give up and continue watching the game. In the ring, after the brief but fierce confrontation before, as Wang Ling took the initiative to distance himself, the two sides came to a standstill again and faced each other. During the confrontation, Wang Ling clenched his fists, squeezed his palms, and couldn't help but comment, "Very strong." During the previous hedging, although he blocked the punches of the two blockers, his palms were hit so hard that they were a little numb. The punches of those two perverts were too strong. No 099 twisted his neck and asked, "Now, do you think we are worthy of defeating you?" No 098 maintained his military marching stance, looked at Wang Ling indifferently and said, "You are no match for us. Your speed and strength are weaker than ours. What can you do to fight us? Our mission is just to defeat you. You can also take the initiative to admit defeat now and jump off the ring, otherwise we may beat you to pieces." Yo-ho! Wang Ling not only had no intention of admitting defeat, but instead joked, "Why, a mechanical program can also be angry and threatening? But, it's useless. I just wanted to test how big the gap is, but I didn't expect you to. You don't show mercy when you gain the upper hand. You are stronger than me because of your physical fitness. You attack continuously and you are quite skilled in Jungzinkan. However, when it comes to fighting, these are not enough. If I say you two are not worthy, you are not worthy. Snort. Then break all your limbs and see how hard your mouth can be." Wang Ling's words seemed too sharp, and the two blockers felt annoyed. They disagreed and attacked again one after another. No 098 in front approached and kicked Wang Ling's throat with his upper leg at extremely fast speed. Wang Ling's speed did not slow him down too much. Faced with this move, he did not choose to block it. Instead, he smiled coldly, stepped back half a step, temporarily grabbed the ankle kicked by No 098, and suddenly turned around. Using the force of the swing, No 098 was thrown up 180 degrees, and hit the floor behind him with a bang. Even the solid floor was smashed into cracks. After breaking No 098's offensive, No 099 also came closer. He stepped forward and hit his elbow, then hit Wang Ling's face with a tricky move. But Wang Ling was more cunning. He turned around and punched his arm. After interrupting the attack, he grabbed his collar with one hand and blocked his legs. He disrupted his balance. He turned around and kicked his legs. No 099 hit the back with a bang sound, and No 099 was kicked away, hitting No 098 who had just climbed up halfway. As a result, the two blockers fell down like stacks of arhats. Not to mention how embarrassed he looked. Between the two of them, you go back and forth, attacking and defending each other very quickly. It can be said that the situation of the battle is reversed in a flash of lightning. One moment they have an absolute advantage, and the next moment they are both in the end. The contrast is really obvious. Well done. Number 100, I support you and defeat them. Well done. The eliminated candidates who had been nervous before could not help but cheered when they saw this battle situation. Even the lieutenant general who had previously judged Wang Ling to be at a disadvantage was a little surprised. On the ring, after the two blockers fell down one after another, they quickly stood up in less than 2 seconds. their physical fitness is not inferior to that of Wang Ling. Of course, it is impossible to cause effective harm to them at this level. However, facing Wang Ling's style of play, these two blockers were a little angry. No 098 immediately provoked, "If you have the guts to fight us head on, don't be like a loach." "Huh," Wang Ling mocked, "are you really stupid or pretending to be stupid? Or do you think I'm stupid? Why should I confront you two stumbling blocks who are still stronger than me? Two big brothers, let's fight. Fighting is not pure brute force. Humph, stop talking nonsense and come again." Ah! It seemed that they were stunned, and the anger of the two blockers became more and more obvious. They had been calm and composed between offense and defense before, but now they had to shout and cheer for themselves. Having suffered a big loss once, the two of them didn't dare to take advantage of the situation this time. One left and one right, they cooperated with each other to attack. Their moves were like the wind, and their moves were tricky and ruthless. Punches, leg sweeps, elbow strikes, flick kicks, horizontal punches, lower hooks, knee strikes, etc., whether it is basic or ultimate moves in Jungzing Fist, they can all be executed quickly, with various types, but standard. Incomparably, it was as if a live teaching of military marching boxing was being carried out at a rapid pace, which was dizzying and dazzling. However, the two of them cooperated with each other and executed all the moves, but not even one punch hit Wang Ling. At this time, Wang Ling was really like a loach, dodging left and right on the ring, and every time he could make a move at the last moment, skillfully evading all attacks from the roadblock. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 550. Double chopping palms, straight punches, left and right uppercuts, side kicks. The fierce battle in the ring continued and gradually became more intense. For several minutes, the two blockers used all kinds of killing moves in Jungzing Fist one after another, and launched almost continuous fierce attacks on Wang Ling. Their attack speed was almost at its limit. They could throw 3 punches and 2 kicks almost every second, and all kinds of powerful and killing moves were landed continuously, which was dizzying for everyone to see. During this period of time, Wang Ling continued to dodge attacks and was unable to counterattack. Under the stalemate between the two sides, it seemed as if Wang Ling was suppressed again. Seeing the dazzling moves and attack speed on the stage, almost all the spectators in the audience were stunned. This level of fighting seemed to have completely exceeded their cognitive scope. The contestants who had been eliminated before could not help but worry about Wang Ling, fearing that if Wang Ling failed to react in time and was hit, what awaited him would be a continuous and violent attack with punches and punches. However, the attack speed of the two blockers on the ring was so fast that it seemed that the winner could be decided every second, and their hearts were affected every moment. There was not even half a second for them to say cheers. Cheer up. Contrary to their worries, the other spectators did not care too much about the result. Seeing the dazzling attack on the stage and Wang Ling's quick dodge, everyone had a feeling of astonishment. This final really made them excited. Got the insight? Oh my god, the attack speed can be so fast. I can't even see how they punch or kick, it's too fast. The admiral, who had always remained neutral, finally couldn't help it at this time and shouted. There was a sound of exclamation. One of the lieutenant generals also continued, yeah, not to mention that the afterimage is coming out quickly, but it is also too fast. The two of them are simply monsters. Another lieutenant general also echoed, the selection of elite combat soldiers has really screened out a few monsters. It is difficult for ordinary people to intervene in this battle. I doubt that Wang Ling can survive such a fierce attack. How long do you want to hold on? No matter how you look at it, he seems to be too defensive now, and there is no chance to counterattack. Really, the general, who had always been optimistic about Wang Ling, retorted, I admit that the attacks of these two people are too fast and sharp, but don't underestimate Wang Ling. He can defeat the two of them. To have persevered despite the combined onslaught is a powerful symbol in itself. It's still unclear who will win and who will lose. It's too early to draw a conclusion now. Even General Montenegro had a kind of mysterious confidence, crossing his arms and eagerly watching the battle on the ring. The two lieutenant generals were not very optimistic about Wang Ling. At least in this battle, Wang Ling was at a disadvantage no matter how he looked at it. However, they could not resist the general's words, so they could only remain silent and continue to watch the battle. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Huh, swish. Boom. On the ring, the continuous fierce attacks continued. The attacks of the two blockers were like endless sea water, impeccable. The shadows of their fists and legs swept past, and they could even cause bursts of sound. From time to time, due to excessive force, it will hit the ground, making bursts of roaring sounds, which is shocking to watch. Up to this point in this battle, it seemed that the two blockers had an absolute advantage and were constantly suppressing Wang Ling, while Wang Ling was always tired of being on guard. But in fact, only the two blockers knew how painful this battle was. They had tried their best to attack, but they could not hit Wang Ling with any punch or kick. And as time went by, they also found that even if they were, it is difficult to stop even if they want to, because Wang Ling is like a hidden tiger now. Once their attack relaxes a little or deviates slightly, Wang Ling will immediately launch a swift counterattack. As a last resort, the two blockers could only attack continuously and interfere with Wang Ling as much as possible. On the surface, Wang Ling was suppressed, but in fact, the two roadblocks were completely restrained, and the more they fought, the more frightened and anxious they became. Fortunately, their programs are special, and some are like robots. Ordinary people are easily affected by their moods, but it is difficult for them, so they can maintain such a stable and efficient attack for a long time. However, no matter how sophisticated the machine is, it has a certain probability of failure, not to mention that these two stumbling blocks are in special circumstances. As a result, after a few minutes of continuous attacks, No 098 threw a left hook, but Wang Ling dodged it and closed the punch just a moment late. But just such a moment directly determined the direction of the entire battle. Wang Ling almost immediately seized the opportunity, bypassed the punch and quickly kicked No 098 on the chin. Kicked it into the air about 3 meters, spun it continuously for 3.5 times in the air, and hit the floor with a bang. The close attack between the two was directly broken due to an oversight. No 098 was knocked down by the counterattack. No 099 was not much better. The shadow of his fist was still flying, but without the restraint of No 098, Wang Ling's range of activities was reduced. It was a little bigger, and it dodged all his fists with a few flickers, and began to fight back quickly, hitting him with a kick, a punch, and an elbow, hitting his crotch, wrist, and chest respectively. For people of their level, even a temporary attack is very powerful. Wang Ling counterattacked one after another. Offensive No 099 was interrupted instantly, and because of this last elbow, he was out of breath for a while. Angry, he couldn't help but take a few steps back. Wang Ling seized this opportunity, quickly crouched close, turned his hands into spears, and launched a fierce counterattack at all the joints of No 099's body. His hand spear was as hard as iron and could almost penetrate wooden boards and break stones. Such a fierce attack on No 099 removed all the big joints on his body in almost an instant and crippled him. The whole person. Then, Wang Ling punched No 099 on the chest again. With this punch, Wang Ling almost used all his strength, almost cracking his sternum and shattering his internal organs. The punch was so cruel that it was shocking. My heart trembles at the sight. With this punch, No 099 flew backwards, spurting blood from his mouth along the way, and fell to the edge of the ring only 10 centimeters away before rolling down. But even if he did not fall into the ring, No 099 had completely lost his combat effectiveness. He even fainted due to excessive injuries and was eliminated from the competition. The attacks of the two previous blockers were dizzyingly fast, and Wang Ling's counterattack was equally swift. From the time he counterattacked until the two blockers fell to the ground, it only took a few blinks of time. In this flash of lightning, Wang Ling not only completed the counterattack, but even reversed the situation of the battle and eliminated one person. This method was so powerful and the change was so fast that everyone at the scene was trembling. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 551. It's not just the situation on the battlefield that's changing. It's also the same in the arena. One moment, the two blockers were still chasing and beating Wang Ling, completely suppressing Wang Ling, leaving him too tired to defend himself and unable to fight back. However, the next moment, the situation suddenly turned 180 degrees. Wang Ling not only started to quickly he counterattacked, knocked down one person, and eliminated one person. The before and after comparison of this situation left all the audience stunned. Even the eliminated people who supported Wang Ling forgot to cheer for a moment, as if they had not yet recovered from the before and after conflict. Oh my God, you fought back so quickly. Not only these people, but also the officers. Wang Ling's counterattack was so sudden that they couldn't react in time. In a flash, the two blockers on the ring had all fallen down, and directly one person was eliminated. The two lieutenant generals who had not been optimistic about Wang Ling before looked embarrassed, but General Haishan and the two generals had particularly fiery eyes, staring at Wang Ling without saying a word. Boom. As for the ring, No 099 was completely eliminated, but No 098 did not lose its fighting power. Wang Ling had only kicked it over before. When the audience was horrified, No 098 had already slapped the floor. With this, Countershock stood up immediately. Wang Ling's previous kick, although it was a temporary kick, was still powerful. No 098's mouth became distorted, and the arc looked a bit scary. But No 098 was stunned and twisted his jaw, forcibly setting the bone, and twisted it back with a click. Wang Ling glanced at him and smiled playfully, "Are you going to continue to resist? In the same way, I can give it to you now, admit defeat, and suffer less." Snort. However, the program of No 098 has been set up just to stop Wang Ling. How could he voluntarily admit defeat? He didn't answer Wang Ling, but responded with practical actions. With a cold snort, he rushed towards Wang Ling alone. Looking at his posture, he wanted to fight Wang Ling to the end. Stubborn. Wang Ling mocked. This time he no longer focused on defense. Instead, he became passive and took the initiative, punching No 098 first. No 098 did not dare to ignore Wang Ling's attack. He quickly blocked, counter-punched, elbowed and swept his legs, and continued to counter-attack with various moves of the military fist, and the speed was so fast that it almost left an after-image. However, the combined fierce attacks of No 098 and No 099 were only able to contain Wang Ling. Now that No 099 has been defeated and eliminated, he used the old routine to attack, but it did not pose any threat to Wang Ling at all. No 098 is proficient in Zhengzhenkan, but Wang Ling has also learned it and knows every move in it, and naturally also knows how to deal with it. He could easily dodge every move of No 098 and counter-attack with skill. His arms, armpits, thighs, and shoulders became the focus of Wang Ling's care in the subsequent attacks. Every time he dodged, he would use counter-attack once with a spear or knee. As a result, the two sides exchanged blows. Wang Ling escaped all the attacks, but No 098 was beaten continuously. After a period of time, No 098 was beaten to numbness, and the rhythm of the attack was completely disrupted. There is no order. It is true that the combined physical fitness of the two blockers is superior to Wang Ling, but in terms of fighting experience, they cannot even catch up with Wang Ling. It can be said that Wang Ling has no pressure to deal with the roadblock alone. He can easily defeat him. However, the way No. 098 dealt with other people before also made Wang Ling angry. The tricks he used during this period were purely in tooth for tooth. After fighting back violently for so long, No. 098 has completely lost its previous calmness. It is like a robot with disordered programming. It roars like a beast from its throat. It even abandoned its best military fist and started punching and kicking randomly. Kick. Although his attack speed was still very fast, this kind of attack was not even as threatening to Wang Ling as the Zhengxing fist. As a result, Wang Ling dodged it like a mockery for more than 10 seconds, then suddenly saw the right moment and kicked him in the air. On the side of No. 098's head. Although No. 098, the stumbling block, was still better than Wang Ling in physical fitness, he couldn't bear this kick. He was kicked 5 or 6 meters away, spun 2 times in the air, and finally landed on the edge of the ring, with his lower body hanging down. On the ring, his upper body had been thrust out, his face landed on the ground, and he fainted in this embarrassing posture. The two roadblocks were finally defeated one after another. On the way to the elite combat soldiers, they still failed to stop Wang Ling, and the mission ended in complete failure. While Wang Ling killed these two opponents, he still maintained an indifferent expression on his face and slowly lowered his foot. His movements were crisp and neat, very cool. Oh, we win. Well done number 100, ha 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 ha. That's a beautiful kick. The group of candidates in the audience were still surprised when they saw this scene. The whole place was quiet for a while. It was not until Wang Ling's kick was implemented that they finally burst into cheers. As for the other spectators, after being shocked, they glanced at each other and immediately burst into warm applause. After watching this fight between dragons and tigers, and witnessing the emergence of the winner with their own eyes, the group of people couldn't help but feel excited, and everyone was clapping their hands vigorously. Even the officers were no exception. However, these people only applauded for more than 10 seconds and then put down their hands. Listening to the cheers and applause at the scene, they felt very happy in their hearts. General Haishan laughed heartily, ha ha ha, I was right. This young man Wang Ling is very strong. No, I have said before that I believe in the coach's vision. No, what a beautiful win this is, the general who had always supported Wang Ling also echoed. The two lieutenant generals seemed a little ashamed and shook their heads with a smile, I have to admit it. Faced with two people with better overall qualities than him, they can still win. Wang Ling's fighting power is too strong. Worthy of the title of hero. As for the admiral who was always neutral, he kept smiling and saying nothing, as if he had everything under control. Good. Wonderful, beautiful. Croak croak croak. Croak croak croak. The cheers and applause at the scene were still continuing, and the staff member responsible for related matters ran over at this time, first checked the status of No. 098, and then jumped onto the ring to check No. 099. Confirmed that he was not dead and that Wang Ling had not violated the rules, and then he breathed a sigh of relief. He was not a medical staff, but he knew some of the ways of practicing medicine. After checking, he also learned how serious the injuries of the two roadblocks were. However, he had no pity or pretense, so he naturally called the military doctor and treated the two people carried it down. It wasn't until they were no longer visible that the staff officially announced the results, the final assessment of elite combat soldiers, the winner is number 100, Wang Ling.